Leadership is hard, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is that I can't make it any easier, but the good news is that we can work on it together to get better. And you want to know the secret? Who you are comes before what you do. It's form before function. So let's get to work together. I'm Preston Poore, and this is PQ. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Jeff Justice. You're going to learn what David Copperfield told him to help him find his comedic voice, how Jeff gained confidence to get up in front of people night after night, the importance of not taking yourself too seriously, and what Jeff wished he knew as a beginner comic. Here's the second part of my conversation with Jeff Justice.
So I got to work with just about everybody: Seinfeld, Foxworthy, Brian Regan, you name it, over the years.
Yeah, that's great. Who would you say, I guess, was the most impactful on you? Was there anybody that took you aside and said, "Hey, Jeff, here, let me give you some tips," or is there a takeaway you took from somebody? I'm not going to lead the witness on this, but there was something you said about Jerry Seinfeld that stuck with me.
Actually, it was David Copperfield.
Well, there you go. Okay, a magician.
Man, work on your memory, pal.
Yeah.
I was at a MagicCon test out in Las Vegas, and I was performing this very unique routine that I had. That's one of the things that got me into comedy. And I went up there, and back then, I was just channeling like Steve Martin and Belushi and those people. I'd be doing the trick, going, "Hey, okay, so here's my trick. Whoa, where did it go?" And I did real well in the contest. And afterwards, this guy comes up to me, and he's David Copperfield's manager. And he comes up to me, he says, "Kid, I got to tell you that, the stuff you got there, the stuff that's just great. I just love that. You can go far with that, but you got to stop doing this stuff that's, Aykroyd and Belushi and Steve Martin and stuff. But the stuff that you do, that's just great. Keep it up." And he's walking away, and I wanted to just scream at him, "What did you see that you thought was me?" Because, at that point, I thought all of it, was me.
Right, sure.
And, eventually I figured that out over the years. Yeah. But it's funny, I watch those old videotapes, and I'm going,
you're like,
how did anybody laugh at what I was doing?
Yeah, but a lot of that has to do with finding your voice, doesn't it?
Yes.
And so I know there's probably people listening, they're saying, okay, how do I find my voice? And I think there was maybe what David was tapping into is that there wasn't the authentic Jeff Justice that was there, right? And so
it was this fake guy.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you make the adjustment then from there?
Thousands of hours on stage.
Okay.
And just getting comfortable, because the more comfortable you get up there with it, the more conversational you get. And one of the things I probably had said to you, I say to most classes right before we graduate, I said, the only difference between you and me right now is I know I'm funny. I've been doing this long enough that I know the jokes work the vast majority of the time, 95% of the time. There's going to be times when stuff doesn't work, everybody's going to bomb, but you don't know that now.
Yeah. Because
this is your first time.
Yeah.
So that's just it. It's just, you do it so many times that you just get the confidence. You go, okay, tonight that, it almost gets to be funny because you'll have a joke that doesn't work that always works. And you're in this other part of your head just going, what the hell happened there?
Yeah, right.
that always works.
Right.
Well, I'll try something else. Or the other thing, you say something you've said all the time, which isn't even part of the joke, an audience starts laughing hysterical, and you're going, okay, why are they laughing now?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. One of the things I love that you passed on, that I picked up on, was around feedback. So I remember being on the stage, and everybody was the same way, but you would be off to the right when we were first delivering and we were telling our jokes, whether reading them or memorized. But then you'd give feedback on it, right? And so tell me about delivering feedback to some people and how that's taken, because I remember some people didn't take your feedback, because you just told me, you said, what's funny, you know how to tell a joke. Somebody doesn't follow it, then they bomb. How do you handle that?
I would say I'm lucky in that the vast majority, and that's the second time in 2 minutes I've used that phrase, of people that take the class do listen to what we tell them. That's what they're paying for. They're paying a lot of money, like almost $600 to take the class. Right. Man, I gave somebody $600. I listened to everything that they said, right?
Right.
You got to be gentle, and I learned that from people that were Toastmasters, because I used to be much more cut and dry, going, no, that's not it. That doesn't work. And they're going, ease into it. Be okay, I like the way you did this and that and everything. But the thing is, most people are making the same exact mistakes. Their stuff is too long. They don't have the punch word in the right place. They're not emphasizing the right words. They're not using the funniest words that they could use in that situation, because there are some words that are funnier sounding than other words. And it could be their eye contact. Some people might be looking down. Some people might be moving all over the stage, and you got to get them to calm down.
Yeah.
But I would say probably at least half the learning in the class comes when you students are on stage. I'm correcting what you're doing, and everybody else is paying attention and learning about that.
Right.
So, yeah, it is kind of tough. We were talking about my friend Ricky Steele before, and he said, that final graduation, I didn't know whether to walk out of your house or punch you in the nose. And I'm going, well, I'm glad you didn't do either one, Ricky, because you were really funny. Yeah. But I have to be tough with them. It's a tough love class. I can't let people go on stage and not be funny, and that's what we promise them at the beginning. I go, if you do what I ask you to do, write the jokes, do them the way I tell you to, no way I'm going to let you go on stage and not be funny.
Yeah, and you were good on that guarantee. So
and
that was
I probably
awesome.
only had a half a dozen people out of 3,100 over the years that said, no, I want to do it this way.
Yeah.
And maybe one of them was right.
Yeah.
That, hey, you're right, that did work like that. But the other five, there's nothing I can do to help them. I'm going, you're not going to listen to me, and you're going to go up there and just say it the way that you want to say it. Well, I hope it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, by all means. Hey, let's shift real quick to the workplace, because a lot of people that are listening to the podcast are emerging leaders, and so they're like, okay, so if I give a presentation, do I need to try to be a comedian in front of people?
No.
What would you say to somebody like that?
No. You don't want to be a comedian, right?
Why?
Because it's not the right place for it. What you want to be is the person that they think is just a normal speaker. Oh, that's just Preston. He's up here to, give his regular, management report, and all of a sudden the humor starts to appear in it. Like I used to put on characters. I'd be hired to be like the new vice president in charge of reorganization, or a government official that was down there to ruin their lives. And I would start off very serious and get people to the point that they were like, really didn't like me. And then all of a sudden something funny would slip in, and then something else funny, and then it would start to build, and finally they'd realize, this is a funny show. Yeah. But for a leader, what I tell people is, in your position, is you should never, ever use humor in a business presentation, except to get a point across. So the key is that if the humor doesn't work, well, sometimes people will get the point even better if it doesn't work. Right. But it's everything in my business presentations, whether it was laugh more, stress less, avoid getting burned out, or humor in the workplace, all those type of programs, it was always, this is the point I want to get across. And here's the humor I'm using to get it across. And that's how people should do. Yeah. So what we tell them to do is, the simplest one is for this, because, a lot of the people that we were training in business weren't speakers. They were just people that wanted to deal with stress, and we help them with stress. But for the people that were speakers, easiest thing is always keep yourself a little humor diary, humor journal. Write down anything you think of that's funny, things that you see that are funny, stories that you hear that are funny that you think you can use later on. When it comes time to write your speech, write it out normal, okay? Then go back through it and pick out the points that you want to drive home, and then find humor in the materials you've collected that will help you make that point.
That's so good. I've often said and told people that I think it's Victor Borges, famous pianist, said the shortest distance between two people is laughter.
Yes.
Right? And so it's that human interaction and ability to connect with somebody else that makes a difference on that. Which I want to dovetail real quick into this idea about, you said that it was so important for us to not be so serious about ourselves, take ourselves so seriously. Tell me why that's so important.
Well, at first it destroys your body. And, your mind, stress, I can't give you all the medical data on it, but read anything by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. The studies on it just, showed, basically what they're saying is life is so hard, okay? And humor really kind of adds like a lubricant to the wagon wheels or whatever, so that you go smoothly over this bumpy road instead of hitting every little bump. And people like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like one woman, I won't say she's my daughter, but she could be.
Okay, maybe.
Drama, everything. Everything's got to have drama. It's like, why are you making a big deal about this? This is nothing. This is like in the realm of things. Forget this. This is, and what they say, don't sweat the small stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. So true. I think so.
Well, Stephen Wright had one.
What'd he say?
The original one was don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
Oh, it is.
And his was something about don't pet the sweaty things or something. I don't know if I got.
He's awesome.
Funny guy, though.
So good.
And unique. Nobody like him.
Yeah, absolutely. He stood out, right? A differentiation from a comedic perspective. Tell me about the way, also, I'm going to kind of flip this a little bit. How does humor help diffuse a negative, critical, tough situation that you're in? Have you ever been in a situation, I know you are a professional comedian, but have you encountered something where we've had to use a sense of humor?
I'll tell you two of them that happened to me, and both of them were getting pulled over by the police for speeding.
Okay.
And one was in St. Louis, and one was in Jamaica. And in the Jamaica one, I might have had an illegal substance underneath the seat of my car. But this was a long time ago.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm coming through this little town, and on my way to the grill, and I drive by this guy standing there, which could have been a policeman, and he's like waving, and I wave back, friendly people down there, and I'm smiling. And I get about a mile down the road, and this motorcycle cop comes flying up behind me, pulls me over, and just yelling at me, "You get back there," and da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, okay, and I get back there, and I'm going, I'm in this Jeep, and I'm going, if he looks underneath my seat, he's going to see something underneath there that I don't know if he should or not.
Sure.
And he's like, where's your wallet? Where's your ID and stuff? And I just got an idea because I'd done it once before in St. Louis. And I had this animal case in the back seat. And it had this raccoon puppet that I have the ability to really make look like it's alive. Okay. I mean, it's really kind of freaky. And I had all my magic tricks in there. So I grabbed a few real quick. And I went to, because I was down there trying to get some jobs.
Sure.
So I bring him out, and he's like running up and around me, and a big crowd had gathered around. And there was one big skinny guy there, and he's like, "Throw him in jail, man!" Oh, da, 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 da. He's yelling that at me, and the whole stuff, Yeah. So I get the raccoon out, and this guy like looking at it like this, and I'm trying to get into it with Rocky. He's always running around. It's like I'm always trying to hold on to him and everything. And I gave him something to eat and everything, and all of a sudden he turns around. This skinny guy gets real close to him, and I just can shoot him. I could shoot him like here to you and just hit you right in the chest.
Really?
Well, he just about jumped out of his shoes, went back about 6-7 feet, lands on his butt. Everybody's laughing and everything, hysterical laughing. And I start doing magic tricks for everybody there, put on a prompter magic show, had everybody laughing. And finally the guys go, "Okay, man, slow down. Don't go too fast." I'm like,
that's really good.
Yeah, but I've had 2 or 3 times like that I've been in a bad situation where I used humor to get out of it, or magic, both.
That's awesome. Great story. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, when you first started your comedic journey, is there something you could look back all those years ago right now and say to your younger self, "I wish I'd known that," or "I wish I'd done this differently"? Or is there something you learned that you would do?
Yes. You're talking about way back at the beginning. I wanted to be funny. And my ego wanted to get laughs every single show. And I always wanted to get more laughs than everybody else. I mean, that's how I moved up to finally headliner at the big clubs. But in the showcase clubs in New York, that's where you go to practice your stuff. That's where you go to be bad and, and work on stuff.
Sure.
And my ego just wouldn't let me do that. I went in there with if I had a 20-minute set to do, I was in there with 20 minutes of my best stuff every single time. Where I was working with these other guys that were bombing left and right, and they'd come up, and I go, "Man, I never even heard him do those jokes before, man. I can't believe that stuff is that bad." And that he's even sticking with his comedy career. Then one guy, Mitch in particular, who I would always be judgmental about his material and stuff. Well, we got booked for a one-nighter in New Jersey one night, and I'm the headliner. He's the feature act, and he goes on, and he just kills. Well, that's where he did all of his A material, not in the showcase clubs where he's practicing the new stuff like I should have been doing. So I probably spent 4 years perfecting what eventually wound up being about 45 minutes to an hour instead of getting 3 or 4 hours worth of stuff and keep honing it down. So I would have written more and put more work into bombing. Like in Tai Chi, we have a saying called invest in loss. Mm-hmm. And when you invest in loss, you're not trying to win all the time, but you're finding out why you are losing, and you're using that against your opponent. Stuff. So
that's so important. I talk to a lot of people, Jeff, about failure, right? And not that they are failures, but how do you handle failure in a culture and an organization? Can you fail forward? Tell me a little bit about that, because that ties in exactly what you were saying. Because it sounds like obviously there's a lot of hard work that goes into your career and what you did, and everybody. I have a genuine respect for everybody that's ever on the stage, because I know what goes into it now. But when you fail, what happens from there?
Well, as Jerry Seinfeld would say, that if you're working in these showcase clubs and you're not failing at least half the time, then you're not growing. Mm-hmm. Because failure means you tried something new. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. You know stories about Edison 10,000 times to figure out tungsten worked. And that's just it. That's why we always tell all of our people that continue in comedy, always record yourself, okay? Because you'll have an honest record of what you did that night. And a lot of people lie to themselves. They hear a few people laugh and they go, "Oh yeah, the audience seemed like they really liked it tonight." I got some laughs. No, you got like 3 or 4 laughs at 20 minutes, man.
Right.
And plus, as I said before, there's sometimes things are going to happen you're going to get laughs on, and now you got a record of it of going, why did people laugh?
That's right.
Or when something didn't work, you can go back and listen to the tape and go, oh, I see. I didn't deliver that right, or I didn't pause long enough, or just as I said that punchline, that person sneezed real loud and it took everybody's attention away, or whatever. Yeah. But failure, and that's the plant bed of comedy. That's where everything grows from. Yeah. Because you got to fail in order to move on.
Sure. And so relevant what you're doing, and also then obviously in the business place and in life as well.
But you got to use common sense too, because I remember you got to figure. I started this as a comedian magician, got on TV a few times, like Thick of the Night and Comedy on the Road and stuff, doing my magic comedy act that I could do on TV. Mm-hmm. And it finally got to the point that I said, if I want to be on TV more, which I do, I need to start writing stand-up. And never got advice from anybody, never took a comedy class, nothing. My first one is I wrote a bit about quitting smoking and pizza. And it was about 5 minutes long. And if I took out everything but the funny parts, it should have been about 15 seconds long. And I tried that on a Thursday night at the Comedy Cellar and got a few like, a couple laughs here and there. And I go, okay, and I'll work on it, the rest of this week, and I'll do it Friday night, which I'm following like Dennis Miller, it could be Robin Williams walking in the room, all the top people at the Comedy Cellar. Right. And I decided to open up my bit with it, routine, and just stunk up the place. It was pitiful. And I remember the MC who owned the gig there, he was very upset with me that I didn't have the intelligence to know that you would not open up on a Friday night with a brand new, unproven bit, and that it was so poorly written,
Yeah, right.
And that's when I started realizing, man, there's got to be a way to do it. And I started buying every comedy book and reading about how shorter is better, and don't elaborate on things. Keep them tight until you got them down. Then you can start adding to them. And I didn't even know what the rule of 3 was.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, and I know in your comedy workshop you've got a workbook, and then you also you make sure we're very tight on everything, on the jokes, the punchlines, the premise, everything goes on that. So I'll learn a lot, obviously, on that. Hey, I want, as we wrap things up, before I ask you what your maybe one thing is that you would leave with us today for the emerging leaders that were here. It's funny that you and I were talking on the phone the other day, and I said, I see you as a business person too, right? An entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about that. Because I know you have things other than what you're doing with the comedy workshop.
I'm like the accidental entrepreneur because the comedy class started as a comedy, as a comedian, you got to book yourself, it's kind of a business thing. But then the class, all of a sudden I had to start, keeping records and marketing a little bit and I need to have a book for these people and build things and build the word of mouth and make relationships with comedy clubs so I can do my classes there and shows there. Right. And then during one of my classes, one of the students, I was talking about how I also do programs on humor and stress. He says, oh, man, you know who could use a program like that? Court reporters. And I'm like, how would I make any money doing that? He goes, well, they got to get continuing education credits. So long story short, I started putting together a program for court reporters. That went over well. I started finding court reporters that were experts in areas like grammar, punctuation, ethics, things like that, that were also good speakers. Brought them into the fold, started videotaping the programs, and now I've got over 110 hours of CEUs online that people can take, and probably one of the biggest schools in the country for court reporters getting continuing education.
That's awesome.
But can I tell you my favorite story? Do I have enough time?
No, we don't have to. Just kidding. Go ahead. Let's go.
Because you were asking me when we were on the phone, did I ever have any doubts or anything?
Sure.
So around the mid-'90s, no, it probably had to be later than that. Yeah, so it's probably the late 90s. We were in Blockbusters. Were they still around then?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in there with my 2 daughters, my wife, and the kids are running around all over the place. And I have a very distinctive voice. And I'm like, hey, kids, come on, stop that and everything, da-da-da. And I notice this guy walks in the front door, and he hears my voice, and he stops, and he looks at me. And right before that happened, I was thinking, I'm always talking to God about different stuff. And I said, God, is this comedy workshop worth it? Am I really doing any good? Am I helping anybody? I said, should I just stop doing that and focus on what I'm really making a good living at, which is my corporate speaking and stuff? And so right after I finished that thought, that's when the guy walks in the front door and he looks at me and he comes walking over and he says, I know you don't remember me. And I actually did recognize the guy. He says, I know you don't remember me, but I took your comedy class about 8 years ago. And I want you to know that every good thing in my life that's happened is a direct result of me taking that class, and my life has been wonderful, and I wanted to thank you. Wow. Reaches out, shakes my hand, turns around, and walks out the building.
Wow.
And I just looked up, I said, okay, I'll keep doing it.
Right, keep going, right?
I take that as a message, but I can't even believe the guy didn't even come. He just turned around and walked out and left again. I go, did he just come in here to tell me that? Because I needed to hear that at that moment.
Yeah. That's powerful.
So that was it. That was the continuation of the comedy workshop. Well, for him.
It's kind of like a calling almost then, isn't it, for you? Because that's the way that you help other people realize their potential in a certain way, right?
It is my service. I always tell my wife cooks for the homeless. She does all these great things. And she goes, well, your service is teaching that comedy class because, you're already helping people and changing some lives. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. And I get paid for it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. I should have asked you that about a lot earlier.
That's why I jammed it in there, because you didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. You told me up front. You said, Preston, you got a great story.
I got a great story.
If
you like me, ask me.
I forgot. That's okay. Hey, what's from a leadership perspective, what's the one thing that you would tell folks as we're concluding our discussion? What's one thing you want them to walk away with from your perspective when it comes to leadership and a sense of humor and that type of stuff?
Trying to find the humor in most things. You can't find the humor in everything, I don't think so, but I'm sure there's people that would disagree with me, but there's always something funny about what's happening. Even when things are going really bad, there's a humorous way to look at it. People always say that, wow, you shouldn't use humor at funerals, there's some of the funniest things I've heard were eulogies and like that. There's an old story about a woman who was dying, and her 2 sisters are by the bed. And they start talking, and they go, do you think she can hear us? And the sister on the bed leans up, and she goes, I'm just dying. I'm not deaf.
That's awesome.
Right. Finding the humor. And I always try to do that. My wife and I were always finding the humor in disaster, especially raising kids. We always laughed about the kids, but we always laugh with each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The outlook that we have on that. So thank you. Today, you have been a gift to me and to our listeners today. So thank you for that. So similar to what you heard the gentleman say to you in Blockbuster, I'm sure there are people out there listening and hearing your approach to things. And that I highly recommend. The Comedy Workshop, we'll put the link to the Comedy Workshop in the show notes on that. And if you want to stay and follow and be in contact with me, LinkedIn is a great way to do that. We also started a new newsletter for P-Cubed. And I'm Preston Poore. This is P-Cubed. Take care. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeff.